No soldiers, no bombs, yet your money is at war. Global money war could silently destroy your savings today. Welcome to Money Clarity Hub. What if the most powerful war happening today isn't fought with weapons, but with money? No explosions, no armies, no breaking news alerts. And yet, it shapes your daily life more than any conflict you see on television. It influences the price of your groceries, the value of your savings, and the opportunities available to you in the future. Because behind the scenes, a quiet battle is unfolding, a global struggle for control over currencies, markets, and economic power. It's subtle, complex, and almost invisible. But once you understand how it works, you begin to see its impact everywhere. This is the hidden money war, and whether you realize it or not, you are already part of it. To most people, money feels simple. You earn it, spend it, and if you're careful, you save some of it. It feels stable, almost predictable, like a system you can rely on. But that sense of stability is carefully maintained. In reality, money is not just a neutral tool, it is one of the most powerful instruments of control ever created. It determines who has influence, who has access, and who gets left behind. And like any form of power, it is constantly contested. At the highest level, the global financial system is shaped by a relatively small group of powerful actors. Central banks, governments, and major financial institutions operate at the core of this system. They don't compete through force or confrontation. Instead, they compete through decisions about interest rates, money supply, and currency value. These may seem like technical adjustments, but they have far-reaching consequences. A single policy shift can impact millions of lives. It can determine whether businesses expand or shut down, whether people can afford homes, and whether entire economies grow or collapse. At the center of this system sits one dominant force, the US dollar. For decades, the dollar has functioned as the backbone of the global economy. Around 80% of international trade is conducted in dollars, and nearly 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in it. Oil is priced in dollars, global debt is issued in dollars, and international financial systems depend heavily on it. Even in 2065, the dollar remains deeply embedded in global finance. Around 85–88% of global foreign exchange transactions involve the dollar, and roughly 58–60% of global central bank reserves are still held in USD. Nearly all oil trade continues to be priced in dollars, reinforcing its global dominance. This gives the United States extraordinary influence, because when the world relies on your currency, you gain the ability to shape global rules, influence financial flows, and even apply pressure on other nations. But dominance like this rarely lasts forever, and in recent years, the challenge has already begun. Between 2022 and 2025, multiple countries accelerated efforts to reduce dependence on the dollar. China expanded yuan-based trade agreements, including oil deals settled in yuan. By 2024, the yuan had become one of the top 5 most used global payment currencies, steadily increasing its share in cross-border transactions. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, it has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. These investments are not just economic, they are strategic. This reduces reliance on the dollar and gradually builds an alternative system. The introduction of the digital yuan represents another step in this direction. Unlike traditional currencies, digital currencies can operate outside conventional banking channels, potentially reshaping how global transactions are conducted. Meanwhile, other nations have been adjusting their strategies. Russia has reduced its exposure to the dollar, increasing its holdings of gold and other currencies. Countries within the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have discussed creating systems that allow trade without relying on the dollar. These moves are not random. They are part of a broader effort to reduce dependence on a single dominant currency and to gain greater financial independence. But currency is only one layer of this hidden war. Another powerful tool is interest rates. Interest rates determine the cost of borrowing money. When rates are low, borrowing becomes easier, encouraging spending and investment. When rates rise, borrowing becomes more expensive, slowing economic activity. While this may sound technical, its effects are deeply human. Interest rates influence whether people can afford mortgages, whether businesses can expand, and whether economies experience growth or contraction. And when a major central bank like the US Federal Reserve changes interest rates, the effects are not limited to one country. They ripple across the global economy. Between 2022 and 2023, central banks around the world aggressively raised rates to combat inflation. The US Federal Reserve increased rates from near 0% in early 2022 to over 5% by mid-2023, marking one of the fastest tightening cycles in decades. This had global consequences. Higher US rates pulled capital away from emerging markets. Countries with dollar-denominated debt faced increasing pressure as borrowing costs surged. Several economies experienced currency depreciation, forcing their own central banks to raise rates, even at the cost of slowing growth. In 2022 and 2023 alone, more than 90 central banks worldwide increased interest rates, creating a synchronized tightening cycle not seen in decades. In other words, a decision made in one room can impact millions of people across the world. This interconnected system revealed its fragility during the global financial crisis of 2008. The crisis began with a housing bubble in the United States. Banks issued risky loans, often to borrowers who could not afford them. These loans were bundled into complex financial products and sold across the global financial system. When housing prices began to fall, the system unraveled quickly. Major financial institutions collapsed, markets crashed, and panic spread. More than $10 trillion in global wealth was wiped out. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, and their financial security. To prevent a complete collapse, central banks took extraordinary measures. They introduced policies that had never been used at such scale before. One of the most significant was quantitative easing, which involved creating large amounts of money and injecting it into the financial system. Over time, more than $10 trillion was added to the global economy through these programs. This helped stabilize markets and restore confidence, but it also had long-term consequences. When large amounts of money are introduced into the system, they do not distribute evenly. Instead, they tend to flow into financial markets, driving up the prices of assets like stocks and real estate. Those who already own these assets see their wealth increase significantly. Meanwhile, wages often grow more slowly and the cost of living begins to rise. This dynamic has contributed to growing inequality around the world. Today, the top 1% of the global population holds more wealth than the rest combined. This is not just a coincidence, it is a structural outcome of how the system operates. Then came 2020, and the system was pushed even further. The global pandemic brought economic activity to a sudden halt. Businesses closed, travel stopped, and uncertainty spread rapidly. Governments responded with massive stimulus programs. In the United States alone, over $5 trillion was injected into the economy. Globally, the total exceeded $15 trillion. This prevented a complete economic collapse and helped support households and businesses during a critical period. Financial markets recovered quickly and asset prices surged once again. But beneath the surface, new pressures were building. By 2022, inflation surged to levels not seen in decades. In the United States, inflation exceeded 9%. By now, in many other countries, it rose even higher. For everyday people, this translated into rising costs across all aspects of life. Food became more expensive, fuel prices increased, and housing costs continued to climb. Inflation is often described as a natural part of the economic cycle, but in reality, it acts as a hidden tax. It reduces the purchasing power of money over time, meaning that people can buy less with the same amount of income. If wages do not increase at the same pace as inflation, individuals effectively become poorer. This is where the hidden money war becomes deeply personal. It is no longer about abstract economic policies. It directly affects daily life, shaping financial stability and long-term prospects. At the same time, countries have increasingly used financial strategies to gain competitive advantages. Some nations deliberately weaken their currencies to make exports cheaper and more attractive on the global market. While this can boost economic growth in the short term, it can lead to instability when multiple countries adopt similar strategies. This creates what is known as a currency war, a situation where countries compete to devalue their currencies in order to gain economic advantage. But when many countries engage in this behavior simultaneously, it can lead to volatility, uncertainty, and long-term economic challenges. In recent years, money has also become a direct geopolitical weapon. Financial sanctions have emerged as one of the most powerful tools in global conflict. By restricting access to the financial system, countries can isolate entire economies. In 2022, sanctions imposed on Russia froze hundreds of billions of dollars in reserves. This demonstrated that control over the financial system can be used as a strategic tool, influencing not just economies, but geopolitical outcomes. For many nations, this was a wake-up call. It highlighted the risks of relying too heavily on systems that can be controlled by others. This realization has accelerated the search for alternatives. One of the most significant developments in this area is the rise of digital money. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin introduced a new concept: money that operates independently of central authorities. At their peak, cryptocurrencies reached a total market value of over $3 trillion. They offered the promise of decentralization, transparency, and financial independence, but they also introduced volatility and uncertainty. Governments responded by developing their own digital currencies, known as central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Over 130 countries, representing more than 95% of global GDP, are actively exploring or developing CBDCs. These digital currencies could allow for faster transactions and greater efficiency, but they also raise important questions about control, privacy, and the future of financial systems. In a world where money can be tracked and programmed, the balance between convenience and control becomes increasingly important. So who benefits from this complex system? In many cases, those who are closest to financial markets and institutions have the greatest advantage. Investors, large corporations, and asset holders have seen significant gains over the past decade. Meanwhile, many individuals face rising costs, economic uncertainty, and limited financial mobility. The gap between these groups continues to grow, but behind the statistics are real human experiences. Families adjusting their budgets to cope with rising expenses, young professionals delaying major life decisions due to financial uncertainty, small businesses struggling to manage increasing costs. The hidden money war is not just about numbers or policies, it is about people and their everyday lives. It shapes opportunities, influences decisions, and determines outcomes in ways that are often not immediately visible. Seeing the hidden money war requires a different level of clarity. The Clarity Mastery Vault builds that clarity, linked in the description. And the system is still evolving. New technologies are transforming financial markets. Artificial intelligence is changing how trading decisions are made. Digital currencies are redefining how money is transferred and stored. At the same time, global alliances are shifting. Some experts believe the world is moving toward a multipolar financial system, where power is distributed among several major currencies rather than dominated by one. Others warn that this transition could lead to increased instability and uncertainty. What is clear is that the system is changing and the pace of change is accelerating. For individuals, this means that understanding how money works is more important than ever. Most people interact with the financial system every day, but few fully understand how it operates. They see the effects: rising prices, changing markets, economic shifts, but not the underlying forces driving these changes. And that is what makes this hidden war so powerful. It operates quietly, without obvious signs or clear boundaries. It influences outcomes without drawing attention to itself. But once you begin to understand it, you start to see the connections. Between policy decisions and everyday expenses, between global events and personal finances, between power and money. And that understanding changes perspective, because in a world driven by financial systems, knowledge is not just useful, it is essential. The hidden money war is ongoing. It continues to shape economies, influence decisions, and redefine global power structures. It does not have a clear beginning or end. It evolves with time, adapting to new technologies, new challenges, and new players. And now you can see it, not as a distant concept, but as a force that directly impacts your life. Because once you understand how money works, the world no longer looks the same. You begin to question what once seemed obvious. You start to recognize patterns that were previously invisible. And perhaps most importantly, you become aware of the system you are part of. Because in a world shaped by money, not understanding it comes at a cost, but awareness creates opportunity. The war is still happening, quietly, continuously, and now you are no longer unaware of it. So the next time prices rise, markets shift, or policies change, take a moment to ask a simple question. Is this random, or is it part of something larger? Because once you see the system, you cannot unsee it. And in a world driven by money, understanding it is power. Thanks for watching Money Clarity Hub. Keep your mind clear and your money growing. Subscribe for more practical insights every week and check our playlists for more clarity and growth.